Welcome, Larry. Hi, Sarah. Good morning, Mindy. Coming in fast. John, Lauren. Welcome to everyone. Okay, I have us at 10:01. So Carla, if you wouldn't mind, please get us started with interpretation, and then we can really kick off this meeting.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Carla Rubalcaba. I am with the Community Language Cooperative. Today, we'll be practicing language justice to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to speak and listen in the language they feel more comfortable with. To do this, we will use simultaneous interpretation between Spanish and English. So I will say this in Spanish. When I finish, we will turn on the interpretation feature, and you will see like a little world map in the corner, 3 dots. It depends if you're on a computer or on a cell phone. Pretty much just look where it says more so you can choose the language you want. When you select it, please don't forget to click where it says mute original audio so you don't hear both languages at the same time. If you only speak English, please choose English. If you're fully bilingual, feel free to listen whichever language you want. Since I'm going to be interpreting from English to Spanish, Spanish is about 15% longer than English, so it will take longer to interpret. Try to please stretch your words when you speak and make sure that you mute your audio when you're not speaking so I can hear only the person speaking and everything gets interpreted. Before we start, I would like to remind that everything that you say is going to be interpreted and will be remain confidential. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a message, and I'm going to say this super fast in Spanish so we can start. Give me 1 second. Hola a todos, mi nombre es Carla Rubalcaba y trabajo con Community Language Cooperative. Hoy practicaremos lo que llamamos la justicia del idioma para asegurarnos que todos tengan la oportunidad de hablar y de escuchar en el idioma en el que ustedes se sientan más cómodos. Para ello utilizaremos interpretación simultánea entre español e inglés. Lo que ustedes escucharon hace un momento fue esto mismo, pero en inglés. Al terminar mi introducción, activaremos la función de interpretación y verán un mapa, un mundito en la esquina o 3 puntos donde dice más o menos more, que significa más. Depende de estar en celular o en computadora. Ahí le hacen clic y van a poder elegir el idioma que deseen, que en este caso vendría siendo el español. Al seleccionarlo, por favor, no se les olvide hacerle clic también donde dice Mute Original Audio, que significa silenciar el audio original para que no escuchen ambos idiomas al mismo tiempo. Antes de comenzar, me gustaría recordarles que todo lo que diga será interpretado y se mantendrá confidencial. Si tiene alguna pregunta, no dude en enviarme un mensaje por chat y empezaremos en unos momentos. I believe we're all set up, so interpretation begins now.
Are folks seeing the globe icon on their side?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Let's do this. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Monique Mares. I am dialing in today from Pueblo, Colorado. I have been serving as a middle woman, a spider in the middle of the web to connect all of the dots across these events, and we're so excited to share with you all of the work that's taken place. So for today, the goal is to talk about why a regional convening event series versus one mega event. We'll hear a share out from all of the regional host participants who created events in their communities across the state. We'll take a look at some statistics, both at the regional level as well as the state level, talk a little bit about evaluation, and then we will talk about priorities, what surfaced, what patterns showed up both for priorities, challenges, and also some recommendations for policy, et cetera. And then we will talk about what's next for the Colorado Food Summit and share a bevy of resources for folks I'm really excited to share with you all of the great content that you can use after this meeting, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go. Before we jump in, I want to say thank you very much to all of the sponsors of this series. The logos of institutions you see on the screen supported the event in a number of ways, not only as serving on a steering committee, but also in dollars so that we could send dollars back out to community for folks to plan the event that they wanted to have. And now I'll turn it over to Libby to talk about the Colorado Food Summit's history.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Monique. My name is Libby Christensen. I'm the statewide food and ag specialist with Colorado State University Extension. And it has really been my honor and privilege to be a part of this process. And Monique, if you go to the next slide, I'll share a little bit about the purpose of this webinar, and then talk more specifically about what the potential vision is and possibility for the food summits. So our first Colorado Food Summit was held in 2020. It was a statewide convening event that happened here in Denver. And immediately following that event, it happened in February of 2020, we found ourselves in the COVID pandemic. And as we started thinking about what would a future event look like, Colorado State University, the Food System Institute, brought together leaders from Colorado food policy councils around the state to think about how could we improve on the event that was held in 2020. And one of the things that we heard from folks, particularly coming out of the pandemic, was that it was unrealistic to try and bring folks from across the state into one room, particularly for the public health implications, and also a need for communities that had been working in isolation, physically isolated, to come back together. So in 2022, with the support of Lillian Brislin, there was a number of regional events that were held around the state. Those conversations and dialogues helped to inform and shape what happened in 2022. That event, again, was held here in Denver, and the event provided a lot of different conversations and opportunities for sharing. But we heard from that event, too, that there was really this need for more action-oriented and specifically around policy. In preparation for 2023, we started seeing our community-based partners that were place-based really organizing their own events. And we thought there wasn't a lot of time and energy, and there was exploration of maybe it would be more efficient to just draw on already going on conversations, from everything from the Sun, Soil, Water conversation happening in Pueblo, or the Western Soil Health Conference that happens over in Montrose, to other conversations. And so we ended up working with someone to look at the agendas and conversations and the materials that were produced from those regional conversations to help inform the 2023 event. But we heard feedback from folks that the event tried to do too much for too many different folks. We had over 750 people in attendance of that event, and it tried to meet everyone where they were. And also, by relying on this kind of secondary data analysis, it didn't necessarily accomplish some of the intended goals and mission of the Food Summit. And so we heard from folks that they wanted space and time to once again convene at a local regional scale, where they thought it was more realistic and possible to have outcomes and actions that could have meaningful change for the folks that they were working with. So after that 2023 summit, we moved forward with this new approach where we did an open call for community-based organizations to host conversations. We ended up kind of using a map from Colorado State University Office of Engagement and Extension to divide the state into different regions, and then just started talking to folks about how many conversations they would need to have in those places that would be reflective of the geography and the people that they work with. So this conversation and what we're sharing today will really is a reflection of all of that work, and just a huge thank you to everyone that's put so much time and effort into this conversation. But Monique, if you go to the next slide. when we were thinking about the regional conversations and the convenings, we talked about, we went back to the drawing board a little bit. And one of the other things to stress about this whole process is that it's iterative and that we keep trying to improve upon it. And so we went back to the drawing board and tried to synthesize exactly what is the problem statement that we're trying to accomplish or overcome or address through the regional summits. And so here is the latest iteration of our problem statement that Colorado's food and ag system faces significant fragmentation with limited coordination and collaboration due to constraints on time, facilitation, and transparency. These challenges contribute to systemic inequities, inefficiencies, and hinder the potential for positive impact across communities throughout Colorado. Next slide. And so with this problem statement in mind about what we were trying to address, we identified a mission and vision for the Colorado Food Summit as really a space to convene influencers, to share understandings across scale and sectors, to coordinate strategies, drive collaboration, and foster bilateral evaluation to improve Colorado's food and agricultural system. The vision for the Colorado Food Summit is to create an annual space for statewide coordination, reflection, and celebration, which generates measurable progress towards a food and agricultural system that centers the health and well-being of all residents and the landscape. And a few things that I just want to point out here. There's, I think, sometimes when people see evaluation, there's concern that it's going to be around accountability or like people watching over your big brother kind of thing. And I think what this really is hoping to spark is a bilateral conversation across scales and sector so that folks at the state level are hearing from community members about what is and is not working, and that community members can reflect back to find out what are other examples or things that could be replicated in their own community, or are they actually moving the needle? And so today's is part of this effort to create this space for these conversations and to share back what we're seeing, as well as really state a state of the Colorado food and agricultural system by collecting all this information at local levels and then rolling it up into a statewide document. So this is a lot of words on a slide, and I'm not going to read them all. But this is just a snapshot of the type of actions that have been taken as a result of these regional convenings, and just really highlights that the work that you all have put in has helped us make actionable steps towards achieving that mission and vision. And so I think as we continue to engage in this dialogue, that we hope to see more of this work happening. And also that we're open to conversation about how this work could be done better and have more impact. I'll hand it back to Monique.
Okay, so the map that you are seeing on screen is the breakdown of regions for this event series. Maps are imperfect, and you're going to see a few versions of maps as we go through this activity today. But this is the way the state has been broken down for the purpose of this event series and the information we'll present today. The other thing that I want to flag, the colors on this map are particular. So as we go through the slides, you'll see some comparison pieces, and they're reflective of the region. So just calling that out, it's not at random. And the last thing I'll say, while you're seeing 6 regions here, we did have 7 host committees. The Liderazgo Comunitario group did a statewide e-series, and so you'll hear from them as well. We had 7 host committees covering 6 regions and the whole state. Okay, let's jump in. So from here on out, you're going to see a snapshot of stats from a particular region. They'll be consistent across all of the slides. While that's happening, I'm going to get a timer ready for our speakers. And Cheryl Anderson, if you would like to come off mute, or Libby, if you can take care of that, I'm going to get this going. Everyone is going to get 3 minutes and 33 seconds today to talk about their region. And yes, the slides are there for your visual pleasure, these stats. We will give you direct access to all of this information in our resource folder at the end. We're not going to spend time discussing the details now, but just know you'll have access to all of this information here in a bit. And with that, Cheryl, I turn it over to you to take it away.
Good morning. I'm Cheryl Anderson. I'm the Executive Director of the I Will Projects. And on behalf of the Southern Colorado Regional Planning Committee, I want to express our deepest gratitude to everyone who made our Food Waste to Community Wealth Symposium possible. Special thanks to my co-lead, Perdita Butler, owner and operator of Quarter Acre and a Mule Farm, and Pueblo Food Project, who bravely agreed to schedule the symposium hours before their signature conference. And of course, a huge thank you to our 42 participants who brought positive energy and insight, and to all the statewide partners who provided direct support to make our gathering a reality. I'd like to provide an update on the 3 regional priorities that were surfaced at the Food Waste to Community Wealth Symposium. Institutional food waste collection. We hope to make some progress on that later this summer. Pueblo City Schools board member Bill Tebow participated in the symposium and has made plans to meet with the district superintendent in late August or September to fashion an approach to implement House Bill 1059. He is actively seeking input not only from myself and other community members, but organizations throughout the state. Later this summer, we will begin a community composting pilot. Our partner, Rocky Mountain SARE, was awarded a CDPHE Environmental Justice Grant that will allow several local nonprofits to provide youth and community with education on composting, composting and other sustainable practice, including a neighborhood-centered food waste prevention, reduction, and composting program that will feature Black Soldier Fly-powered container composting. We are very fortunate that we are able to utilize the knowledge and partnership of the team at Food to Power. Patience and her team prove every day that nonprofits can lead the way on community composting. Another recent success, increased awareness. We had media coverage of the symposium. There was a very robust article in the Pueblo Star Journal, and so we do appreciate that. One of the outputs of the symposium was the Pueblo City County Health Department is exploring how the Emergency Services Division can utilize the Hungry app, who presented at the symposium. So this is an example of the growing conversation between local agencies and innovators across the state. I want to stress that I greatly appreciate being able to celebrate these wins during a time of tremendous change and uncertainty, because we must acknowledge persistent challenges such as lack of capacity, limited funding, and the need for better coordination. And with that, I'll close.
All right. Thank you, Cheryl. And since the Southern region and Pueblo is my hood, I'm going to take 30 seconds to plug an amazing success. Tomorrow, we launch a Double Up Protein Bucks program at our Eastside Farmers Market. It is the first Double Up Protein Bucks program in the state of Colorado. So we got it going on down here in Pueblo. Talk to Cheryl and I if you want to learn more. Okay, over to the San Luis Valley. Jay, if you want to get yourself ready to come off mute, I'm going to reset our timer. Just a quick plug for the SLV. They are the only region in the state of Colorado whose revenue comes from crops more so than livestock. So across all of the regions, the proportion of sales crops to livestock is livestock takes the cake, but in the SLV, it is for crops. So shout out there. And Jay? your time begins.
Okay, thanks so much. I'm really glad that we were able to be a part of this. And I want to let folks know that we didn't just hold one event for this this whole series. We were been in the middle of a 6-county-wide food and agricultural action plan or strategic plan. And so we worked that into this food summit work. And so part of that has included 9 key perspective interviews from farmers, ranchers, processors, and businesses that are experts in the Valley, as well as 11 focus groups that we've held. And now we're in the middle of community engagement sessions where we are taking the 300 ideas that we were given from those experts, those interviews and those focus groups. They were not unique ideas. They were, a lot of them did overlap a little bit. So we've been assessing all of this data with a steering committee of around 30 people, and we're taking that out to community members right now. And so we're putting on 14 community events to help us vet these ideas, see where the community wants these things to land. And we've engaged with over 200 people so far. We have 6 events left to hold, and we expect to publish our action plan this October. But there is a lot of really great support in there for all sorts of programs that are going to support our farmers and ranchers, support our food businesses and our food system throughout the Valley. And a handful of things have come up and been happening because of the engagement we've done throughout the several years of this. We did a food and ag assessment starting in 2022, spent 2 years on that. And so this has been a continuation of that process. And when we've gone out and engaged with community on these subjects, people have gotten inspired and just taken action and begun implementing things without us involved. And so that's been really wonderful to see. And I'm just really impressed at how the community out here is really appreciating being engaged in these conversations, having this information brought to them, and being asked for their opinions, being asked for their expertise. And we've gotten a lot of good feedback. And I just think it's been really, it's really worth visiting all the remote locations that we have in the Valley. We really tried to make it to as many towns as we can, and people have been really appreciative that we've come to their town, because often these rural communities are overlooked and skipped when people just want to go to the big towns and engage with those folks. So that's where we're at in our process right now, and I'm really happy to keep contributing data to the rest of this food and the Colorado Food Summit. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jay. I'm going to reset the clock. We're moving over to the east now. And Julie from the block, if you wouldn't mind coming off mute and sharing your camera. Hi there, welcome. Hi. Okay, quick plug for the east. They are, of the regions on the map, they sell the most agricultural products than any other region in the state of Colorado. You will see that in some slides later, but they're turning and burning on the east side over there. And a quick shout out to Julie, who sent a random email months ago and said, hey, I'm kind of interested in this, and then became a co-host of this event, these 2 events in her area. So Julie, the floor is yours. Time starts now.
Thanks, Monique and Libby and the rest of the team at CSU. I am so grateful for this opportunity and was lucky enough to co-host 2 Soil to Supper events with Tim Staley from the Northeast Regional Engagement Center. So we both applied and decided to join forces to do 2 fairly similar events in Sterling and in Fort Morgan. So thanks to them and, of course, our host committee. It was made up of very passionate farmers, food system advocates, and people with lived experiences that we wanted their voices to really shape this whole effort. So Back in February and March, we hosted our Soil to Supper events. We really focused on building connections and momentum out here in Eastern Colorado. We brought together around 60 people at each event. We invited producers, educators, small business owners, and local leaders from all across the Northeast. This region has a lot in common. We have a similar climate, similar challenges, and it's a place where agriculture really runs deep. We have a lot of focus on exporting, big ag, big commercial ag, and then not so much focus on feeding our local communities. So we recognize our food deserts, limited infrastructure, and people working really hard, often isolated from each other to feed communities and the rest of the world. So our main goal with these summits was to, we kind of had three main points: that people wanted to be connected and have visibility. Producers want to know who's doing what across the region. Economic development is also interested to support those folks that are trying to scale. And then we have local governments that are also showing up, but need clear pathways to know how to support all of these various people across Eastern Colorado. We definitely need more education and support for our producers, especially the small scale guys that don't have as much land access or water rights as some of the bigger producers in the area. There's a real desire to support these guys, but we need to expand into the direct to consumer sales as well. So farmers markets, more opportunity to sell without the crazy licensing that they have to go through, and or just education around that to try and make it smoother. So we need the opportunities for collaboration, which we did see happening at these events. We really tried to make them focused on conversation and asking questions and letting the people that attended have the floor for most of the event. So we saw people like Colorado Craft Beef and Christensen Ranch and Country Road Vines and Wines building collaborations to sell at local markets like Sagebrush Market. And those conversations happened on that floor in that space. So I think even though it was two events, we had things happening on the ground that wouldn't have happened if these people weren't in a room together. So luckily, people want to keep this going. We are still missing strategies as far as lifting up BIPOC, immigrant, and veteran farmers. Like I talked about, we need land access, water, and affordability around those things. But we are going to keep going and looking at hosting more events next year. So thank you again.
Right. Is the 10-second countdown annoying? Should I pause it at 10 seconds? Is that distracting you as a speaker? Tell me real time.
It's probably helpful to just wrap it up because I could have kept going.
Okay. All right. Okay. We'll leave it. All right. Now to the west, we have a dynamic duo taking the stage, Nicole and Rachel. If Rachel, you could come on screen and off mute.
You got it.
Rachel, she
What's
might
our
have
cool
had
stat, Monique?
issues.
All right. Hi there. What's your cool stat? Well, let's talk about the aspirational and enthusiastic nature of the host committee from the West, who threw down 4 events, also engaging and creating local host committees. So not only did they have their regional host committee, they bubbled down leadership to 4 additional host committees across their region, being so wide, and came back with some really deep insights. So shout out to all of the many people who provided leadership for your events. And we will kick it over to your slide. Your shared time starts now.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Hi all, Rachel Landis, Good Food Collective. Thanks for that, Monique. That's just my little spiel that I was going to speak to, is when we saw that swath come down as to this is your food system or your food shed, and you should all get together to share and come up with common themes. We all giggled because there's I think at least 4 kind of drainage basins and mountain ranges and things in the way. And so this often happens at a state level where the West Slope is a monolith. I know it happens all over. We have to divide somehow. And so in our region, there's almost organically formed food sheds within that larger swath. And there are, what's really cool, folks activated in each of those food sheds doing really big work. And so it felt really important to us in this area, if we were going to do an event very similar to what we heard from I think it was the East, could it just be like the Good Food Collective representing the Southwest and saying it was the Western Slope? That would feel very disingenuous and an inaccurate thing to present back to the state. So we just broke up into our 4 food sheds, and that really helped with some great conversation about how that actually works. And so we got some clarity internally, which we're excited to share back to the state. And we were just so grateful for this opportunity. It helped us all start working together even more and understand each other more, and I think spark some new partnerships. And Nicole's going to talk about the grand collective upwelling of how all these food sheds, some common themes and challenges.
Thanks, Rachel. I love being your teammate. I might pass it back to you if you can stick around to talk to some successes if we have time. So overall, the Western region is the largest area, but we have technically, compared to the rest of the state, less food and ag businesses. So I like to say we're small but mighty in terms of the industrial scale of things, but also mighty but small in terms of the land area we cover. So some small but mighty amazing efforts that were made were that we had really amazing involvement from folks like commissioners, the Attorney General's office, the State Attorney General's office, and the State Economic Development offices across all 4. And then multilingual events. So 2 of the 4 did utilize what we all offered, which was interpretation. And so it was in Spanish and English for 2 of the 4 events because Spanish-speaking attendees did arrive. And that reminds me to talk a little slower for interpretation. And we even had H2A workers present at one of the convenings. And as Rachel highlighted for the Southwest, there was even involvement from Indian tribes, and all the counties in each region did attend the event. So that was a huge success. The needs that came out of this were that, 1, let's keep doing this together. This was sometimes in some locations, the first time ever that people had come together. And so there's more momentum to be had in that way. And then for the places that had come together before, there was a reinvigoration of that desire to collaborate and work together. Food processing and community investment were the major needs we saw, and untapped potential was supporting farmers. So I'll say that generally, but we had a really good time, and I think this was an amazing demonstration of how people from various realms can come together and trust each other and build on that trust.
Rachel, any final words?
We're really excited to have come together, and we're super excited to come up with almost like a common policy agenda to bring it back to the state, which I think is where y'all are headed, and we're stoked. So thanks for the opportunity.
Right. Okay, we head over to Mountain now. And a very interesting fact about the Mountain region is they have a high number of food businesses in comparison to some other regions, but very little production. And we'll see when we talk about the statewide details, the largest segment of food systems businesses across the state is restaurants. And so there may be something there with the tourism industry, but let's pop over. Unfortunately, the speaker from the Mountain region is unable to join us this morning. Something came up of a personal nature, and they were very apologetic. And this is just an opportunity to remind all of us, life happens. We're humans. We contribute to this work with our heart and our emotions and all of the integrity we bring to the table, and stuff comes up. So it's all good. Your contributions are appreciated every time you show up, and even when you can't. All right, so for the Mountain region, they face some very unique challenges compared to other parts of the state. Specifically, their geography makes it very tricky to do farming and ranching at times. Also, they have a lot of pressure from tourism. So starting a new farm, getting land in that area is extremely challenging. And as it relates to bringing more local food into their system. This is also challenging due to availability, shortness of the season, and basically how food moves across the region. So some of the key priorities for this area are deeper direct support to farmers. This is a theme that you'll see show up a lot across the regions. How would a new and beginning farmer get started in this place? Is it even possible? Along those lines is land and water rights. So what is happening in that area? How do we ensure that land is available, that water is preserved for agriculture? Again, another theme showing up across the state. And then lastly, a big priority for them is increased local food access along with a growing equitable food system. So if we have time at the very end, if someone from Mountain is on and would like to add a little color there, I welcome you to do so. But for now, we're going to move on, and it's time for the Front Range. Carly, Northern Colorado Foodshed Project, if you could come on camera and off mute.
Hello, hello.
Greetings. And
Alrighty.
hi there. It is no surprise, but we've had these quick stats to the left. 81% of the people in the state of Colorado live in the Front Range. That is a massive number of people when we compare it to the other regions around the state. So a lot to consider when we're talking about this region. And Carly, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Hello, everyone. I am Carly Donahue. I am the executive director at the Northern Colorado Foodshed Project. We are up in Fort Collins area, and as you can imagine, like Mo was just saying, Front Range is massive. We look a little different. There's big populations, big pressure for development, a really wide mix of urban and rural kind of communities. And so sorting out how we took this big, wide region and came to some really, good priorities and challenges meant we were going to have multiple events as well. So we had one down in Colorado Springs with Food to Power, where we did well, I guess I'll go through all of them first. Food to Power, they did a movie screening down in Colorado Springs. We also had the Mile High Producer Summit in Denver, which was a multi-day event, and then a half-day event up in Fort Collins. Our main priority for doing that was just that this is such a big region, and we wanted to tap into events that were already happening or community members and organizations that were already running with these amazing outreach efforts and priorities and all of these things. So we were really lucky to work with everyone across this whole region and come up with kind of a unifier for how all these events got rolled out. And it was really wonderful to actually work with. I think this was also highlighted earlier with some folks of bringing together people that are technically in the same region, but these organizations or these producers, they didn't talk to each other beforehand. So bringing us all together, yes, doing separate events to some extent, but all kind of mingling and strategizing was really, really helpful. And we were really happy to work with folks from, Jeffco, Food Policy Council, just all of these wonderful people that maybe we hadn't met already, and also be able to integrate producers, wholesalers, policymakers, and just community members who are just interested in local food, and really kind of dive into what's at the top of your mind and what are these issues. So priorities that we came up with for the Front Range, a lot of emphasis on equitable access and food justice. If you look at all the stats for Front Range, we are close or above the level of food insecurity on a state average. And so the push to integrate equitable access to food and food justice into these food systems was a really high priority for all of the events. Also to support the producers' economic sustainability. We have challenges with land access here, but also scaling. So the infrastructure and the connections to expand into whatever market you want to expand into, and also challenges with things like zoning or land use code or building code. So that came up a lot. And it was really fun to drop into how can we really build food access and food justice into the overall food system and create those things to best support one another. Oh no, I knew I would go over. There are some really amazing successes and programs with Food to Power and really trying to integrate these local purchasing programs for food access into the wider food system to create kind of a closed loop in a way of building those producer and community relationships so that everybody can thrive. I'm out of
Nice.
time.
Thank you. Okay, last but not least, we have Eva joining us from the Liderazgo Comunitario group. This group decided to cover issues specific to BIPOC and immigrant communities across the state rather than in one particular region. This group is a community of practice group hosted by the Colorado Blueprint to End Hunger, and they executed more than 3 events. I'm sure Eva's going to share that with you now. And so these are the outcomes there. And Eva, the floor is yours.
Hola, buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Eva y bueno, yo antes de empezar me gustaría honrar los nombres de mis compañeros dentro de este liderazgo. Creo que es muy importante no solamente decir números, sino también nombres. Entonces, pues en este proyecto estuvo Dolores, Armando, Erin, Barbarita, Andrea, Bianca, Lucy, Hazel y yo, bueno, Eva. Entonces, tuvimos 3, ¿cómo se llama? Tuvimos 3 talleres. El primero fue mapeo del sistema alimentario en Colorado y entendiendo sus componentes de impacto. En este taller se habló mucho sobre el objetivo y explicar también los componentes y las claves del sistema alimentario, también las cosas positivas y las cosas negativas que tiene este sistema, lo que influía la salud en general, la equidad, el panorama alimentario en Colorado. Y el segundo fue rompiendo estigmas en la salud mental, la inseguridad alimentaria y equidad en el sistema alimentario. En este se abordó el impacto de salud mental dentro del sistema alimentario con un enfoque de la inseguridad alimentaria, la injusticia y la inequidad de salud que tenemos en Colorado. Buscamos también fomentar un sistema alimentario más equitativo y solidario que promueva el bienestar mental. El último fue inmigración y el sistema alimentario y cómo apoyar comunidades inmigrantes. En se dio un objetivo para traer apoyo en las nuevas políticas migratorias, que afectan políticamente y directamente a los trabajadores del campo, a las familias y las comunidades que sostienen nuestro sistema alimentario. También se habló sobre inclusión y resiliencia para proteger a todos y para cómo tener un grupo de apoyo para ayudar a estas comunidades. Como yo lo mencionaba, pues dentro de estos proyectos vimos muchas barreras, pero yo creo que el dar la oportunidad de saber y entender el sistema alimentario y cómo ayudarnos juntos para tener nuevas iniciativas y nuevos proyectos para ayudar y salir adelante en la área de alimentación y los proyectos nuevos que tiene Colorado. Creo que ese es el trabajo y el deber de todos nosotros, traer nuevos proyectos que sean sustentables para apoyar a las comunidades. Gracias.
Thank you, Eva. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit now and start talking about the state as a whole. And so the map that you're seeing before you is another version of the map. And essentially, this points out the regions of collaboration as defined by the host committees. And so if a county is colored in, that county is in active participation in activities in food systems collaborative work across the region. And then you're seeing some spots where they're not colored in at all. And those are areas of the state that either they're not participating in these collaborative discussions, or their activities are unknown, or maybe they haven't got off the ground yet. But you'll see some there will be some connection between this map and the information that we're about to share. Okay, let's jump in here. So this is, again, splash of statewide data, and you're going to have plenty of resources for this later on. But just to flag, the graph here shows total farmland across the region. So we have the majority of the farmland in the east and the least amount of farmland in SLV, but remember, they're producing the most vegetables. So that's, the most produce. So that's interesting to consider. Overall, we have 36,000, give or take, farms across the state of Colorado with an average farm size of 838 acres. That is a broad range. When we talk about averages across 36,000 farms, it's a little tough to kind of pin down an accurate number. There are certainly ranges within that average, but if you do a simple average like you did in third grade math, that's the number. And then each year, more or less, we're selling over $9 billion in product, again, with most of that, about 2/3 going to livestock, the rest to crops. The splash on the side shows you the types of farms that we have growing food crops or crops meant to enter the food system. And if we do our total pop versus, the number of farms we have, we're looking at about 1,000 farms per resident. I will flag that these numbers have decreased since the last time the USDA did an ag census. So both our total farmland and our number of farms has gone down since that data was collected. Oops. Okay, I'm just going to take a minute to pop that off the screen. And here we go. Okay, moving beyond the production side, if we take a look at businesses impacting the food system, this is using a data set from the Census Bureau and the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I will flag that this is not a perfect science. We had one region come up with a major discrepancy in the data as it relates to grocery stores. But overall, this is the set of data that was used. Essentially, it describes the number of businesses in a particular sector, how many employees, and their contribution to wages. So if we take a look at food systems businesses in the state of Colorado, we're looking at just over 23,000 businesses, just over 4 million employees, and about $16 billion contributed to wages annually. That's about 13% of the total workforce in the state of Colorado. And then you're seeing the top 3 categories of businesses that host, number of establishment and host employees. And so, no surprise, restaurants are at the top of the list. Shortly after that is trucking, and then it would be all types of food retail. Now we're going to talk about food insecurity, and again, much more detail in the statewide report. But our statewide average is 12.7%. This increased from 2023 measurement. This is the live 2023 number. It increased from the 2022 number. So by more than a percentage point. What you're seeing here are the counties across the state with the lowest food insecurity. And the colors sort of demonstrate that this is spread out kind of across the state. We're seeing some patterns, the mountain region, maybe less food insecurity than some other areas, west to a certain extent. We have the lowest food insecurity rate in the state in the east in Elbert County. But let's take a look now at the counties with the highest food insecurity rate. Okay, so we know that the statewide average is, you know, right around here, this 12.7 line. Well, we have the majority of the top 10 counties with the highest food insecurity rate in 2 regions of the state. If I would have expanded this to the top 15, every single one of them, except for one county, would have been in either the SLV or the southern region. So is that a coincidence? Maybe, probably not, right? So it's just interesting for us to think about it. The community with the highest level of food insecurity in the state of Colorado today is Bent County, with over 20% of households dealing with food insecurity on a regular basis. So friendly reminder, back to this map where folks were asked to identify where there's active collaboration going on. Oh man, we see so many of those counties with the highest food insecurity rate, and those similar counties were not flagged as being active in conversation. So once again, is that a coincidence? I don't know. All right. Another piece of information that I was excited to look at was grants. Free money entering the system from the CDA and from USDA. Because when we think about investments in infrastructure, we're going to talk about that more in a bit. Essentially, we want to know, like, where is this money going? So this is not a perfect science. This is not an officially stamped number coming from the CDA. This is some background spreadsheet sleuthing based on a document that identified contracts and grants from 2021 through 2024. And we're seeing, no surprise, Front Range getting the lion's share, CSU shortly after, and then the rest kind of over in this space. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the resource folder. Here is the same for USDA grants. I feel much better about the numbers here because this came from an actual government website. So they do a really good job of tracking every grant award in extreme specific detail. And you have access to that spreadsheet in the draft of the statewide document. But again, we're seeing Front Range getting lion's share. And then, you know, the 2 regions that are producing kind of the most crops in the state, 2, 3 are receiving the least amount of investment from federal dollars. So that's interesting to note. Okay, I'm going to pop it over now to Justice for a couple of minutes regarding statewide evaluation of the events. And Justice,
Thanks, Mike.
Awesome. Okay, great. Hi.
Hey. Hi, everyone. I'm Justice Onwardy. I'm with the Colorado Blueprint to End Hunger. My colleague, Casey Neese, is on the call as well, who helped heavily with creating these awesome maps and visuals that you're seeing here today. So I invite Casey to come off and speak and add any context that I leave out. So what you've seen from a lot of the regions who presented today is successes and challenges and what they're looking at. And what we had sent out is a survey, an evaluation survey at the end of each convening, where participants and host sites had the opportunity to look at priority areas for their region, or areas that they believe need improvement, or areas that they believe are successful. So this map shows the responses that we got based on the counties. We received 293 responses total, which is really a great response rate. So thank you everybody who contributed to that and was able to complete those. As Monique pointed out, we see like there's some gaps here where there's some counties that we didn't have responses from, but we really want to be able to try to include the voices of the entire state as we continue these processes of surveying moving forward. You can go to the next slide, Monique.
All right, I'm going to start a clock for you.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and I'll try to be quick. So in the survey, people had the opportunity to select how they show up in our food system. As you can see from this visual, the majority of responses came from nonprofit organizations or coalitions, as well as farmers, ranchers, and producers. Our next highest was community advocates. And so as I go into the next visual, that's going to show how people identified challenges or success areas within their counties, you'll be able to see kind of, okay, maybe there was like a more response from coalitions and more responses from farmers that kind of show why maybe that is. But I invite you to attend a Blueprint Data and Evaluation meeting that we're going to be having next week, where we're going to dive deeper into this conversation of looking at the different responses and how they showed up. So you can go ahead, Monique. So here, this graph shows the top success areas and the top areas of improvement based on different regions. People had the opportunity to select from 13 different options. There was also a fill-in option, but we decided to condense it to show you the top 6 to 7 that came up. So for success areas across the state, people identified support for new and existing farmers, equitable food access, retailer food access, community reinvestment, land and water. They both came up. They were pretty close, as well as distribution and aggregation. And then when we look at areas for improvement, these are areas that people said, you know, maybe we're not as successful, or we're facing more challenges here, or we need to do more work. It doesn't mean that it's not an area of success. It just means that it's not, there's just more work to do and it's not perfect. So as you'll see on both sides, support for new and existing farmers came up as an area that needs to be improved, as well as a success area. So this varied across the state, but it really came up high on both survey responses across the board. Land and water came up as an area of success and an area for improvement. And then we also saw equitable access to food as an area that also showed up on both sides. So you might be asking, what are we doing with this data? What are we doing with this information now that we have it? The Blueprint is working on creating what we're going to be calling the Colorado Food System Tracker. So a lot of the information that Monique provided today, showing some of the data points across different regions, looking at where different investments are, or different areas of how some counties are growing crops, some are more ranching, and trying to look at the gaps across our state. We want to use this information to create a food system tracker. So we're not just coming together every 2 years to look at all the data. The Blueprint wants to create a living tool that's showing that longitudinal data over time, so that we can look at where are the investments across the state from 2020 to now, where, how are we looking at access to land and water, and how are we tracking that? How are we supporting new and existing farmers? What data do we need to collect to support that and know that that's happening? So I'm going to drop a link that will tell you more about the project that we're working on. And I encourage you to attend our data and evaluation meeting. That's going to be next Wednesday, where we're going to go into this into a lot more detail, and you'll have the opportunity to provide input. Thanks, Monique.
All right, thank you. Okay, so from everything you've heard, all of the different regional priorities, the data, the evaluation, we did some sleuthing utilizing the summary reports from all of the events, and came up with some statewide priorities and challenges. Libby's going to cover that now.
Yeah, so as we've said, that this has been an incredible process identifying all of these priorities and challenges across the state. And we've done our best to try and synthesize and make sense of what we've heard. And so here we've got the priorities that were identified and the challenges, and they were relatively consistent across the state. And I think you can hear that from the conversations and presentations that we just received. But there's really this need for middle of the supply chain infrastructure and coordination, additional support for food and ag businesses with regards to land access and agricultural viability, which also includes business viability. Really this need for attention towards equitable food access and food justice and the significant geographic differences that we're seeing across our state. And so much possibility and potential from bringing together these leaders and individuals for collaboration and really wonderful changes. But folks need the space and time and to know who's out there, and a structure to kind of navigate those relationships. There's also really a general interest and need in education for the broader Coloradan public about what food systems look like here in our state, from seeds to food waste, and this recognition about the next generation of individuals that will be working in food and agriculture, and a general shortage of labor, and so a need for workforce development and public awareness. As we heard and have continued to hear from our partners across the state, there are challenges around people power. We are all human, and so many of these folks have worked tirelessly at this work, and they're running on empty. And our current situation at the federal level and the implications at the state level is not filling anyone's bucket, I don't think. So how can we sustain this level of energy and attention with the new reality? There's fragmented coordination and communication. We've heard from our folks in this conversation that there are producers that were pretty close together that had never contacted or never been in a space together, and that this type of event really helps facilitate that space. Ongoing infrastructure and capacity gaps, ongoing access and equity issues, funding constraints, and community engagement and awareness. Next slide. So while everybody else was able to share the wonderful successes, and I really appreciate that sharing and hearing the wonderful work that's going on, our attention was really focused on this policy implications and suggestions or recommendations and guidance for both state agencies, institutions, and organizations that are working at this level. Partly because we recognize that it is an unfair burden to put on our local community members to put together these asks. And so we did our best, but we recognize that this is a first step, and we'll provide resources later on about how to continue this conversation. So the statewide policy recommendations that we have, the first one is just encouraging or requiring institutional procurement for local products. We've seen efforts both in our state and other states that have really used this as a tool to reduce economic leakage by purchasing other products, and that it has economic, social, and environmental benefits when we encourage these local procurement practices. As we're seeing increasing pressure from growth and the changes in our environment, that we need to really intentionally safeguard our agricultural lands to assure that folks can continue to grow on their properties. And this has to do also with water. So that was another policy recommendation as well. And then one of the other ones that we continue to hear, particularly when we were in our rural communities, was that there's a need for intention and thoughtfulness in thinking through how state policies are impacted or implemented and enacted in urban versus rural places. So we may have the best intentions and develop this program, but what that might look like in a rural setting might be very different, and making sure that the policy has the flexibility to do that. Next slide. I'll try and move faster.
Oops, let's see here.
So the next ones is for grants and other institutions. Oh, let's do local policy. So I think Carly really mentioned this for the Front Range, but a need to think about zoning policies that support agriculture and food businesses. We heard this from both rural and urban communities. And kind of related to that at the local level is this need for clear and easy to understand business licensing and regulations for both agricultural businesses as well as food businesses, and that once those local businesses survive and thrive, that it has all these positive implications and additional impacts. And then finally, to look for opportunities to invest in local food and ag systems. We have a number of incredible examples in our state of local jurisdictions that have made funds that have created loan or zero interest loan programs or grant programs to support food and agricultural enterprises. Next slide. And then for the grant and other institution sponsored programs is really to direct energies towards this business support at all scales, middle of the supply chain infrastructure that we heard earlier, funds to purchase. Again and again, we heard about the local food purchase assistant agreement and how beneficial that was to reduce the barriers and to just start that conversation between a producer and a buyer, and just having a little bit of funds and resources to incentivize that made all the difference in the world. Network coordination, again, going toward this mapping piece, and individualized technical assistance. There was a recognition that there are many trainings, webinars, workshops, classes out there for food and ag businesses, but it's really a need for one-on-one technical assistance where there's a person that's connecting with another person to guide them through that process is so beneficial and important for the success of these businesses. And finally, the last recommendations that we have here is generally for state government agencies, as well as statewide institutions and organizations. And there was a call for more strategic and effective coordination across those state governments that sometimes recently there's been this proliferation of food and ag-based programming or policies that cover and span multiple state agencies. And even within state agencies, all of the divisions aren't always in communication, and that causes a lot of confusion and complexity for folks on the ground. There needs to be improved leadership and dissemination of information across networks. And so one of the things that we heard was that it's a really big burden and maybe unrealistic to expect our community-based partners to be the glue that connects people across the state, that it really should be the responsibility of these statewide organizations to make sure information is going back and forth and across these different places. And then asked to really engage with communities as participants and learners. Continued acknowledgement that folks are sometimes from our state agencies and organizations and institutions go out to communities and speak at people, but really recognizing that folks on the ground have so much expertise and knowledge, and that can do coming to that space as a learner and a listener and finding out more. And finally, just expand support to serve all Coloradans, realizing that there is this disparity across geography, race, ethnicity, and we can do a better job to serve those communities.
All right. We are now going to pivot our conversation to the future of the Food Summit. So Libby will talk a little bit about that, and we also have Dolores who will join us. And then in the last moments, I'm going to share many gifts with all of you who've made it to the end and those who will see the recording. So Libby, if you want to start there, and Dolores, if you can get yourself ready as well.
Yes, so as I hope you all have seen through this incredible share out, is that the Food Summit is committed to engaging and meeting folks where they are. And we are doing our best to create multiple kind of on-ramps for folks to engage and step away when they need to step away. And in that kind of spirit and hope that we are setting forth an invitation to all of you to participate in our governance conversations to help guide what the Colorado Food Summit will look like in the future. We're hoping to have an event in the spring of 2026, but we obviously can't do any of this work alone, and it's not a useful event if we do it in isolation. And so, but to make sure that that's successful, we really need to line up and create a governance structure that is inclusive and representative of the communities that we're working with. So to that regard, I wanted to share and invite Dolores to share a little bit about what the steps we've taken to date.
Dolores, I see your camera on, but you might be on mute. Yeah, classic. Welcome.
There we go. Of course, right? That would happen. Hi, everyone. So good to be with you all. As shared, my name is Dolores Ramirez, and I had the opportunity and privilege to work very closely with the Liderazgo Comunitario group, who, on top of developing the webinars and priorities in communities, we collaborated to put together a code of ethics document that can serve as one of many tools that can support as we think about planning and execution and implementation of future summits. So the document that we put together, it's a code that outlines the expectations and commitments that each participant, each region, each person that has anything to do with the coming together of these Colorado Food Summits needs to do and uphold to ensure that the summits are inclusive, equitable, and respectful spaces for all, in a place where all participants feel welcomed, and equity principles are embedded in the way in which we carry out every aspect of the event or of these gatherings. So each with this document, we developed 8 different principles and practices as foundational to the summit's planning and execution. They included I won't touch on all of them, but things such as ensuring that we have an inclusive and respectful environment, things like ensuring that we have representation in leadership at all different levels, not just kind of that institutional knowledge, but also kind of that lived experience. And so again, when this is one of many tools that we hope to implement or that will bolster the way in which we move forward to ensure that leadership at all levels and everyone that wants to participate can do so fully and authentically. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Dolores. Libby, any other comments before I pop over to gifts?
Give out the presents.
All right. Okay, so what comes next? Today you have heard a sliver, a micro moment of all of the great understandings that have taken place across the state. We will be sharing a link in the chat as well as in the follow-up materials with this public folder. Within each folder, you will find a full-length version of the report for each region. And then you will find a 2-pager for those who are looking for the Cliff Notes with the highlights. So if you take time to read across regions and the summaries from the Liderazgo Comunitario group, you will have a very good baseline understanding of what is poppin' in our food system. And that was a key goal of this effort. So we have that for each region here. That is how you will find it. Next, we have this statewide folder. And within this statewide folder, you have the resources from the Community of Practice group and their outcomes, as well as a draft open for comment on the statewide report and this policy brief. The idea of this policy brief, it's short, 6 pages. You can read it, see if you agree. You can hand it to your local legislator. You can hand it to someone who runs a government agency in your community so that we all begin to start speaking the same language and we can understand where we're tracking on these goals. How are we making progress? In addition, and Libby will talk about this next, I'm just going to bring it up. We have one of, if not the most comprehensive listings of food systems organizations across the state of Colorado. Libby, take it away.
Yeah, so we made a list of all of the organizations that were involved in the process, either attending, planning, engaging, referred to, and did our best to start to pull together some of the information about these organizations. So we listed their geography, their contact information, their focus area, based on some different categories that were identified early on in the process. And if you do not see your organization on this list, please add it. It is a living document and will be, we're hoping to kind of flesh this out as we kind of think about these mapping efforts across the state.
All right, and I'm just going to take a moment to drop this link in the chat. Yes, I think with that, we have covered everything that you will find here. Lastly, there is a crowdsource folder, and it is currently empty. This is for all of the fabulous resources that you perhaps have or have worked on that you would like other folks across the state to gain visibility to. So feel free to drop your reports and information here. All right. Oops, let me see.
I also
And
just want to say one last huge thank you. With the sponsor page, we just highlighted the entities that provided funds to make this event happen, but there were so many different organizations and individuals that contributed their time, energy, expertise, perspectives to make this a reality. And so the sponsors is a very small number of entities that were actively involved with this group. And I would say that everybody on that spreadsheet showed up and made this happen.
yeah,
And also a huge thank you to Monique. Like, this would not have happened without Monique. And so I wanted to make sure to give a little bit of just twinkle stars.
yes, lots of appreciation can go round and round for this. We had 60 plus host organizations, 100 plus authors on the reports that you're about to engage with, 1,000 plus participants in these events. This is by far the largest scale of food systems collaboration that has ever taken place in the state of Colorado. So thank you all for being a part of it. We're excited to hear your questions and your feedback. Libby, you may be putting a poll or a survey in the chat. Yep. And with that, we will wrap a couple of minutes over, but we thank you so much for your time and attention, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. Happy Friday.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.